Wonderful. I
Broadcast
think
is
we're
live.
okay.
I can see it. Okay. I can start this off, Venkatesh, if you like.
Please.
First, thank you for joining. And thanks, Rashmi Ranjan, Sitanshu, Lipika, and at least for me, Srishti, who has helped me get this book published, to be at this event. I'm really looking forward to speaking with you, Venkatesh. I haven't spoken with you before, except for in short bits and spurts. So I'm looking for this as an opportunity to generally get to know you, talk about your book. And I also gathered that either you're an economist by profession or by passion. Either ways, to me, that's something of interest. So we can also talk about broad economy in general if we come to that as well.
No,
Over to you, Venkatesh.
absolutely. Yeah, no, thanks, Uday. And likewise, I'm really looking forward to this chat. And thanks to Rashmi Ranjan, Sitanshu, and the organizing team at the Kalinga Lit Fest for this platform. I'm looking forward to this. And thanks, Lipika, and my publisher, Tree Shade Books, as well. Uh, so just to what you mentioned, Uday, economist is a much maligned term. So I have no pretensions to being an economist, but I actually started my career in the equities markets with Credit Suisse first, and then with Deutsche Bank and JP Morgan.
Okay.
So I have an interest in stocks and in
Okay.
investing, both in public and private companies. I subsequently became a private equity investor. So yeah,
Okay.
that would be an interesting conversation, but maybe for later about how we moved, how our journeys have taken us from corporate life to writing, and how the two mingle and mesh and sometimes clash with
Yep.
each other. And I'm
Yep.
sure I noticed that you work with Credit Suisse, which was the first firm that I worked for as well. So that would be an
Okay.
interesting journey. But I think there's a lot of interesting stuff to talk about our respective books.
Yep.
I read the blurb of your book, Pokhran, and very curious to hear about it. So maybe you could just tell us a little about what prompted you to write the book and what was the inspiration behind it.
Sure. Yeah, I was gonna have a little bit of the intro, but let's just jump right in. Okay. I think you covered a
So,
little bit, but I'll talk about my motivation for the book, and I still want to come back to a little bit of intros. Okay.
sure.
Um, I didn't start out thinking that I'd be an author or anything like that, right? I think it was more about ideas that I felt. I don't know if I was going to say terribly passionate about, but something that not a negative term, but I just could not shake them out of my mind. So one such idea for me was this notion that I think we have benefited, like humanity has benefited. We don't necessarily take it into account, has benefited from people that have come before us. No matter how much we look at it and say, oh, we have become bad. I always see this, right? Oh, our ancestors were somehow better. Like that's how we value mythology and stuff like that. But to me, when I look at it, every generation has contributed something that made the next generation's life a little bit better. Where I'm going with it is that if there are quite a few things along our journey that gave us these liberties and freedoms that we cherish and value, even to sit here and to talk openly about our views and not be influenced by some one big dictator or by one big monarch to kind of take over the stage and say his or her voice is the only one. It took a lot. It wasn't an obvious and a straightforward journey, and we may not even have landed here anyway. So I think democracy
As
is
Newton
one
said,
such event. Go ahead. Sorry.
yeah. So as Newton said, we always progress by standing on the shoulders of giants.
Yep, exactly, right. But there are certain things, some giants, or maybe some events that are so much more fundamental, and they become so much like water that we don't even realize that they happen. Like democracy to me is one of those things that fundamentally shifted. I mean, I guess invention of paper currency also, or fiat currency, and then democracy, right? And similarly, in the same way, and for me, when I look around, I see that the biggest um, um, I know I'll come back and close this out, right? The biggest constraint for humanity now, if you look at it, is the generational buildup of wealth. So A makes $1 billion or rupees or whatever crores of rupees, then their kid inherits it, And then in 3 generations, there's a gap where if you think of life as a race, somebody else starting selling tea at 21 will feel like they never have a chance in making it in life, right? So anyway, so to me, that gap bugs me a lot, and something needs to be done. We said no to bonded labor, and we cut out, if your parents owed money, kids don't need to. But we say if your parents had money, kids should get it. That seems like a very obvious conclusion, but we say no to, for example, debt or bonded labor, right? So to me, that concept, I wanted to crystallize it. And that was the paracracy thing. That's what motivated me to write Pokhran in aggregate. And there were quite a few other things that, especially the radioactive fallout in Pokhran as part of the Smiling Buddha test, and how it's two-sided coin. It's a positive and a negative, and I don't want to look at it as it's either a strong positive or a negative. It's an event, and how do we kind of take it forward? So anyway, I'll pause there. I don't want to take up all the time. I want to flip the question around to you as well, Venkatesh. Likewise, I love the poster of your book. I read briefly what I was going to read it as well, right? But I'll come back to it. I want to understand both. At what point? Maybe there are other books, maybe I just did not look at it, but what was your journey to Kalkut, and what's your motivation behind Kalkut?
Sure. No, thanks, Uday. Actually, that was very fascinating what you talked about, how human societies evolve and how human systems, systems of governance evolve. So my journey was, I've had a desire to write for a long time now. And frankly, in the blur of corporate life, somehow, I think the urge presents itself every now and then, but, you just sort of, put it aside. As somebody says, you just sit down till the urge goes away, and then you continue with
Yep. Yes,
so,
that's one way to beat a problem. Either to solve it head on or just hide from it.
exactly, yeah.
Go on.
So I think a few years ago, and this was probably, I think now 6-7 years ago, I was traveling a lot on work. I took almost 300, almost 100 flights, actually 150 flights a year for about 2.5 years. And that's when I had a chance to actually sit down, and there's no mobile phones on flights, thankfully, yet. And
At least.
so you have a chance to actually sit down with your thoughts, and that's when I started penning it down, and that's how it happened. But the inspiration for this, to be honest, actually had been coming in bits and spurts. I was doing a site visit of a road company that we were looking to invest in, and this was a road near Ahmedabad. And I just saw this small board which said Lothal. And I immediately remembered from our class, I don't know, 6 history book, Lothal was one of the sites of the Indus Valley civilization. So I just took a detour and ended up doing more of a Lothal visit than the site visit that I was supposed to do. And this is a town, it's just a ruin actually in the middle of nowhere with one caretaker and a museum. But everything you see there, it was a 4,000-year-old port. That's fascinating. In the middle of nowhere, 4,000-year-old port. And this was one of the most bustling, ports of the Indus Valley civilization. There were many such epiphanies, which led me to try and bring history and mystery, actually, if you will, together. Because I've liked crime thrillers for a very long time now. So in a way, I brought together conspiracy and history. And there was a science element to it as well. So that's how Kalkut came together. It's a combination of history, conspiracy, and science. Yeah. Just going back to your book, actually, there's a very strong, from what I gather, a human element to it as well. So you talked about societies as a whole, and that's the top-down view. But there's also individual people going through these experiences, and how absence of opportunity, poverty, and all that shape the way people look at things, right? So any thoughts on that?
Sure.
I just let the blurb, and I was very almost, I would say, almost shocked to read the raw emotions that seem to present itself, death, disease, suffering, etc. So any thoughts on that?
No, sure. I mean, thanks for picking up that nuance, Venkatesh. I mean, everybody reads books differently, right? I think they take away different things. For me, there was, I think you mentioned Lothal, and to me, Pokhran was like that, right? I've been, I don't know if you've been to Rajasthan in your travels, right? So I've been kind of been in different parts of Rajasthan, but Pokhran has always been one of those stops. If like you would have dabas, and you would if you stop near Pokhran, you just find that the town or the village is pretty much dead. It's 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 hard to describe, right? There is something about it, and not in a positive way, that just feels like the air is dead there, and there is no life, right? And then it talk to people there, and so on and so forth, how fundamentally things change, right? So so there are few things, I think, to answer your question the way at least you're looking at it, right? And hopefully it's helpful for others as well, is that it's a proud moment for India, right? So the thing about the nuclear blast was that some of the things people may not know of is that there were about 75 people involved in the planning all the way to detonation of the test. Okay, so that took about 2 years, and to me that was mind-boggling, that in India, where I feel like somewhere in if you tell me in UK, in England, Bank of England does something like kind of very like a think tankish kind of a thing that the country may not know, but they execute something and so on. Something could happen in CIA. I can see that happening, but in India, for 75 people to not reveal a secret for about 2 years, and for the bomb to be detonated in a way, or the nuclear test to be done in a way, so that none of the satellites, like US, Russian, none of the satellites, overhead satellites, could even spot it. That's just mind-boggling. So you're not revealing it through the media, and you're not revealing it through oversight satellites. So they had to really cover it up. They laid tracks from, I think, Jaisalmer to all the way to Pokhran and stuff like that, right? And they were all covered up in sand, so nothing could spot it. And they drove it in the night with lights off and stuff like that. So that's one aspect of it. And there is a strong patriotic element to it, and it's a great thing to have. It's almost, you can take it as a foregone conclusion that for a large country like India, you need to have that to earn the right to sit at the table with world powers, right? So you kind of have to have it. You cannot just say, I'm a pacifist, and just like me because I'm a pacifist. That's not the way the world works.
Yeah.
But then when you do that, there is a fallout. We are only now we are understanding better. Then also people knew it, but not as much as to what the impact of the fallout is. And partly it goes through just dust coming out, or whatever you call it, the blast coming out, partly through just underground radiation that goes into plant. It ultimately comes out. There is no way to mask it, right? And there were tons of cases that were not necessarily articulated well, because in India there is no structured approach to these things. So there are a couple of, like Dr. R.J.R. Sharma, I think, who had written from 84 to 88, that in that region, the significance of the incidence of various forms of cancer. It's not like one, okay, colon cancer, something like that. When you have multiple organs and stuff like that having cancers, that is a signal of radioactivity in that area, right? So that's one way to think about it. So there are quite a few of those. And then even blindness in male and females both was much more higher in that region than national average, right? So, and then I knew some people in the region who had gone through different, nothing can be directly attributed to cancer, right? Sorry, radioactivity, but they had cancers, and they had either health issues and so on, they died, right? So wanted to make sure that that's covered. And then I've also felt, that's why there are a few things, and I'll shut up, right? I'll go off on a tangent, but I've also felt that India as a nation has been, maybe it's not as much appreciated even by the people who have adopted it, has been a very open nation to allowing asylum seekers. Again, it may not be that overt and obvious like we might have for now in US, because it's a lot more documented, but it goes all the way back into history. Like I go back and look at Cleopatra trying to send her son when I think she was being overthrown, or who was coming in. It was Caesar's son, basically, right? To India from Egypt, right? That was one. And you will see pockets of like Ismailis coming in, Parsis coming in, even now like Dalai Lama coming in, right? So to me, these are all fantastic things that India does. There needs to be a lot more structured policy around it, that we are, and it's a good thing We do not have to say asylum is bad necessarily. If somebody is persecuted, we need to define. Like, I almost think that it doesn't happen in India, but I think it's okay. We want to be, everybody wants to be world power, but what kind of a world power do we want to be? Do we want to be the fighters and the kind of US or China, or do we want to be more benign? And how do we think about it? At least the discussion should start, right? So that was another aspect of it. And then even in India, there is subtle discrimination or even overt, right? And how do we kind of bring that to the surface and deal with it? So there are quite a few of those. And I won't go off. I will shut up there, right? And then, of course, it all dovetails into some kind of drama and mystery. And my whole motivation in structuring the book in certain way was that it is conducive to making it into a movie, because I understand and appreciate that in India, the culture of reading is not as much, and that I would like to change, right, if possible, in any small way, right? So anyway, I will pause on that. We can go on, but I want to know more about your stuff. I really was intrigued when you said Lothal, and to me, again, I will go off maybe on a tangent, but hopefully we will cover off after this call. I truly think, right? So the whole Mohenjo-daro, Harappa, we look at it this way. Then there is Indus Valley civilization. Then you look at Ramayana and somebody trying to look at those. When they say in this nakshatra, in this thing, somebody has put that into a calendaring format. They said it's not just their, I don't know, random ramblings of some astrological configuration, but it was a way to communicate what day and time in a quantum of thousands of years, so to say. So when somebody looked back, they place Ramayana using that at 7,000 years. So to me, it's perfectly fine. It could have been in that area, and people developed certain skills and so on, and there was fighting. And anyway, that's how I look at it. But want to understand from you, when you went there, what did you feel when you said that there is like one museum with one god? I'm sure in India there is no big regard for it, but want to understand, you saw that, and then something clicked in your head to connect a few dots. So what happened? And go ahead, please.
So, my book per se actually doesn't deal with the Indus Valley civilization.
Okay.
So I think Lothal was more of an inspiration to connect history with a story. It was less, so it's not like it directly makes its way into the story. Okay. But I think a few threads have come together, right? I think one is that I think our generation, and actually increasingly the generation of people who were born post 1990, have been relooking or seeking to rediscover their heritage. And, there was a certain, I would say, dogmatic belief in, some of the earlier generations, but there is now actually a very healthy scientific curiosity. And we are actually realizing that there are a lot of interesting things about our heritage, about our mythology, about the imagery, but also about some of the things that we had accomplished. And, for instance, I mean, personally, as somebody who's followed various strains of Indian philosophy, there is a lot of, there's a wealth of wisdom about the human mind, which Western psychology, actually a lot of it, there are a lot of parallels, the notion of sankharas, etc. So there are a lot of parallels between, our ancient psychology and Western psychology, just as an example. So I think a lot of it was born out of just a desire to relook at our history and heritage, and we have a lot of it. So for instance, in Kalkut, there is a direct link to a mystery, a lot of which is fiction, but some of it is set during the last years of the Indian freedom struggle. Okay. And, our traditional sort of understanding of the freedom struggle has been through, frankly, at least in the 1980s, through boring documentaries and some of the dry academic texts, in our textbooks. Yep. But, when you read about some of the people who were involved, it's actually quite fascinating. So there was this woman called Usha Mehta, who in Bombay, during the days of the Quit India movement, all the major leaders were in jail, Gandhi, Nehru, Patel, everybody. And she was running a secret radio service which broadcast speeches and patriotic songs. And the British were literally a few feet behind her. She would change her location multiple times in the same day in order to evade capture. Eventually, she was betrayed and captured. But, for a few months, when the morale was, really low because all the leaders were in jail, that radio actually served to keep spirits high. And this is just one of many tales of, these are real people. It's not just dry academic stuff that you have to mug up. So, Kalkut has a link to the freedom struggle. It also has a link actually to, so I've been interested in, looking at the future, just as you talked about paracracy. That's the word, right?
Yeah, exactly. Paracracy.
Yeah, there are a lot of, there are a lot of trends and how things play out, which way we are headed. There's climate change, etc. So one area which was also of interest to me was actually, unfortunately, now on hindsight, biological warfare. So some of Kalkut also deals with a biopandemic. It was written 2 years ago, well before whatever happened the last few months came to pass. But just the realization that we are tinkering with things which we don't fully understand what it's going to do. So, as I don't know if you've read this ancient treatise called the Tao Te Ching by Lao Tzu, where he says if you use the tools of the master carpenter, and he's talking about God, it's very likely that you'll cut your hand. And so I think science and history came together. And lastly, the name Kalkut is a mythological title. And we are fortunate to not only have a rich history, a lot of which has not been, fully understood or interpreted, but we are also lucky to have a lot of mythological, imagery that we can draw from. So Kalkut is mythological imagery. I can probably reveal it. It's the name of the primordial poison that came up when, the Devas and the Asuras tried to churn the ocean, to get.
Thank you for sharing that, because the name is like I could have looked up, right? I'm like, this is so familiar. Now the moment you said Devas and Asuras, it's like, okay, yeah, this is the thing when they churn the ocean.
So, yeah, it's also known as halahal. Halahal or Kalkut, they mean the same thing, but metaphorically, and this is again the rediscovery of our ancient texts. It actually metaphorically stands for the churning of the human mind. As you seek to achieve the wisdom of immortality and you churn your own mind, a lot of poison comes out. And so anyway, so it's just so fascinating because there are so many things that, I feel quite privileged that as an Indian, we can draw on so many things, and which also have contemporary relevance. So that's what it was. Actually, just to take another track, you've obviously talked about the inspiration you're visiting Pokhran and seeing, and also the bit about how what sort of preparation and what sort of secrecy the whole operation of the nuclear test would have involved. Just to take a different tack at a personal level, I've been in the corporate world as well, and I run my own company right now, and it's quite challenging actually to try and balance the two, and sometimes they almost seem at odds with each other. So what was your journey like in the process of writing?
Got it. No, that's a good question. I think again, I'm trying to see how not to go off on a big answer again. So trying to control it, right? So I think at some point I realized, let's see, maybe there are 2 or 3 things. I'll take one. Like always, I heard and I told myself that, you know what, I am working for a living, right? And I will reach a certain goal, whatever that goal is. It may not necessarily be monetary. It may be a few things. I have my kids. They need to go to college, school, whatever it is, settle. Then I will start doing what I want to do. Okay, that was one. Second, I also found that there is always a desire to like, that's not, it's important, but I need to relax right now, right? I've had such a stressful time. Now I need to just not do anything for a bit. Right? And then the third thing is also there is a little bit of a lack of confidence, if I were to call it that, or not being sure that the effort that you put into something would that yield fruit. So these 3 I had to overcome or at least think through. Right? The first one, I'll just try to lay it out. Right? This is just my learning. And then at some point I decided, okay, let's say I had all the money, I had all the ducks in a row that I had lined up. Then will I suddenly start doing? Oh yeah, the answer was yes. So what is stopping me, like technically speaking, from doing that now itself? Somehow that lining up ducks in a row was important for my mind to delay it. Right? So I just said that with all due respect, screw it. I don't really care. I will start doing it right now. Right. So that was one aha moment that there, and then suddenly I realized that I no longer need to retire. Right. I realized that my work became a lot more interesting because I'm like, I need to do this anyway. I might as well do a good job of it. And I want to write. Let me write it. It's a passion. And if I have other things, like I also work on like some robotic stuff, something that can be sent to Mars. That's my aspiration. So things I pick up, right? I don't have to necessarily wait for the aha moment saying that, oh, I'm now retired or I have all the things in place and I can do it. Second was just a realization. It may seem very innocuous, but for some people, it's maybe natural. For me, it was like, I would always like, oh, I need to have 4 hours of relaxation, for example. Then I said, why do I need that? The time in a day that I have, both time and energy, I cannot really carry over to next day. If I have 4 hours now, I should use them today. It may seem like it's a self-evident truth, but the light bulb had to go up. And more importantly about energy, like I don't have to conserve any energy. My right goal should be, if I have whatever X amount of energy today, I really can't transfer over unless I make it into fat. I have to just burn it. I'll just burn it. Hmm? And the third thing was that where, like I said, if there is if I write and then let's say it doesn't get published or it doesn't get picked up, big deal. At least I would have given it a shot, right? And my whole lens has been, at least for me personally, everybody, like I said, approaches it differently. For me, it has been the biggest kind of driver has been, I'm so glad that people before us took the time to write their thoughts, no matter what innocuous. Like I've read like Egyptian stuff where you read a story about this guy, like one of the biggest bank heists, if you were to call it that, is probably in Egypt. I'll just go off on a 30-second tangent where the dad is a treasury builder, right? Imagine this, right? He would build treasuries for the kings and whoever pharaohs and stuff like that. And that dad had put in one stone block that is movable. He tells his son. So the first eldest one is the more kind of enterprising one. He goes in and steals from the same treasury 3 times. The third time, the king has put in traps where his brother gets caught. So anyway, it goes off on a tangent. Super interesting story. But somebody had captured it in writing. So I'm like, I'm so glad. Then you read Herodotus, who wrote 500 BC. He went around the world and he tried to capture how people lived. Such amazing richness and variances of culture, right? So to me, anyway, yeah. So then I said, I like it. I might as well write it. And then if nobody reads it, I'm not doing it for anybody else. There was this realization that in life, previously, like I see people like, oh, I need to grow, but if people start focusing on, I think maybe this is what Ricardo said, right? Focus on your core competency and just build that. Like for Belgium, if they make beer, that's where his thinking was. Just focus on making best beer. Don't try to say, oh, Germany is also making, France is also making. Let me not focus on beer. You do it because you find you're good at it, and the rest will be taken care of. Anyway, I'll shut up. But I want to know about you as well. Like you are quite accomplished. You said private equity to me, at least whoever watches may or may not make sense. That's an amazing field, challenging, demanding. Investing in stocks, that's also a demanding thing, I guess. And then of course you probably had tons of education to back that up. And then you sit down to write the book. So what's your journey like? What did you go through?
No, I think, sure. So as you mentioned, this bit about some sort of procrastination, I think was there in me as well to begin with. I think mine came in the form of trying to think that there would be this perfect moment and I would write something and it would turn out perfect. So somewhere actually the fear of imperfection prevented me from actually putting pen to paper. So it was easier to think that the time is not yet right. And maybe I'll jot down a couple of ideas, but I won't actually start writing because somehow I realized that there was this fear of it not turning out perfect. And later on, I realized that actually it's the fear of failure is actually one of the biggest barriers to creative pursuits. And then I think one fine day, I just decided the urge was too strong and just decided to start writing anyway. And things defined themselves along the way. I think so. Overcoming that self-imposed barrier, which said that, listen, not yet, you're not ready. I think that was a big, big move. I think the second part was, to begin with, I wrote very sporadically in fits and bursts. So I would write one day and then I would think that I need the right inspiration, which is important too.
Yep.
But the inspiration would, especially if you're traveling and busy with deadlines and everything, inspiration comes after 1 month or 2 months. But somewhere the thread starts breaking because the story starts looking like it's written by different people at different times.
Like Bible.
So I
don't know if you read it, but go on.
So I think the realization that, inspiration comes more frequently if you are actually regular with your plodding. I think that was the second realization. So I learned to stare at a blank screen and be okay with it.
Okay.
And then the inspiration started coming at a more regular frequency. So I think the realization that you need to be regular and disciplined about it, I think that was the second aha moment. Sorry.
Got it.
And as I told you, I was actually traveling a lot. So I think that gave me that space and time to be able to write. I think for a lot of people who, they may be in corporate careers, or they may have family responsibilities, or they may be, pursuing entrepreneurship. I think it's important to take some time out for yourself every day. This is not time with family. This is not time actively spent, playing or something. It's just time that you are with yourself and your thoughts. And that's when the creative, the creative creature within you, which is very shy, that's when it starts sort of presenting itself. So that was my big experience. And then once I started writing and got into the rhythm, after that, it was much more enjoyable. Yeah. But then with writing, the good part is every day is new. You're just creating something out of thin air. So it's a continuous journey and a very exhilarating one. Yeah.
You nailed it. You nailed it. I think maybe writers get it. Maybe you have to have it. Like I've been told, right? Sometimes I've been told, oh, you talk too much, right? That's why I started writing, actually. Like my wife would tell me, like, you have to theorize everything. Then I said, I don't have a captive audience at home. So what do? I then channel it into a book. That way I don't have the desire to speak so much. I can just point to it. So that was, to me, also one more motivation. And maybe I don't know if it's a negative or a positive, but her telling me that, you know what, you just have to theorize everything. I don't want to hear it anymore. And I was like, okay, that forced me as well. So how long did it take for you? So I think that was super insightful to know that you've been able to use your flight times. And when I had flight times, I just go to sleep, or I try to snack, and I'm mostly watching videos, okay? Because I just don't know why. Sometimes, I guess it's a 2-hour flight, I might be able to do a little bit. If it's a 7-hour flight, I actually find it to be more draining personally. Okay, but anyway, that's just me. That's not as important. How long did it take for you? Like I don't know, about months. That's just technically speaking. And did the plot evolve for you? Because everybody found it to be slightly different, right? For me, like I had the plot in my head, like from start to finish, the key blocks were there. It just came to me. It's not even like I had to, like, I'm not saying it's a great book or anything. Let's keep that aside. But the story that I wanted to tell was there, right? And then I was filling in the places, the characters, and so on and so forth. But yours, at least what I'm internalizing within what you said, is a little bit more organic. It grew as you wrote more. Did the plot also evolve as you're writing? I guess that's the question. And how long did it take, starting with that?
Sorry. Yeah. No, absolutely. So actually mine was something that evolved organically, and that actually made it really tough because, you would spend almost a year working in a certain direction, and then you realize that something doesn't add up. And, in a thriller, I think all the elements of the plot need to come together. So I've had a situation where I had to junk pretty much, I think, probably about 50,000 words of writing because it led on to something that didn't tally, So it was quite an excruciating process in that sense.
That's a lot of words. I can appreciate.
Yeah.
So it's almost a book for some people. Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah. So so that was there. And so I think the first book took me a lot longer to write. I would say
Okay.
it took about 2 years of writing and another year or two of polishing and pruning. While the second book, Agniban, which should be out in 2 or 3 months, actually, that I worked on it very differently. So I spent a few months, maybe 8 or 9 months, just thinking about the plot. And by the time I actually started writing the first word, the plot was largely in place. So the actual writing for Agniban just took me 4 or 5, maybe 5 months. So
Got it.
there was a difference in the approach. Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
that's the key. I think in this case, like we discussed structured versus not, I think you're structured in the Agniban right away. Then you had to fill in the compartments in there, so to say, right? So it's a little
Yeah.
bit more
Yeah.
straightforward than.
I let
So
I let all the swinging happen in those 8 9 months where the plot swung from one extreme to another.
got
But in
it.
the
You
first
just
one,
the procrastination helped. I think this is slightly a segue. There was a good. I miss TED Talks as well, right? TED Talks used to be amazing. I don't know if you watched TED Talks or not, or if you're a viewer
yeah.
of it. That was my one of my things, right? I watch. Just on a side note, my time is spent watching SpaceX videos, autopilot videos by Tesla and whoever else somewhere related. Then I used to watch TED Talk. TED Talk used to cover like amazing stuff across so many genres and topics and sciences and building societies and all that stuff. I miss it with this pandemic, right? But I
Mhm.
want to understand from you, right? So now you had structure, which is good. Now I understand. I think it's the evolution of you as the author. But I guess I still haven't understood your motivation. Maybe it's just me, right? Maybe you mentioned it, maybe you missed it. So what drives you to write? Are you I'll be more precise, right? Are you trying are you focused to entertain folks? Is that your primary focus and that's where you stop? Are you trying to message something deeper? Or is it just your own desire to get your word out in a form that you care about? It could be even other than this, but
Yeah. So actually, that's a very interesting question. For me, I think, to be honest, unlike my other pursuits, my corporate pursuits have a clear goal in mind, and they have some reasonable semblance of a plan.
got it.
But actually, with writing, it's very different. I think for me, it's now just become a way of life. And in a sense, for me, among all the activities that I do in the day, writing genuinely represents this bit about being in the moment and enjoying the process.
Got it.
So,
Got it.
so for me, I think, I mean, maybe I shouldn't say this, but even if hypothetically I don't get published, I would still like to write. So, I would
Good.
not get
Yeah.
published, but I would still like to write. So for me, it's
Got it.
become a process rather than a goal. But I'm curious to know how it was for you. So, you clearly talked about certain conceptions you have about society and how societies can evolve and how governance can evolve, and that was quite interesting. Is that one of the key drivers for your writing?
So yeah, I mean, Pokhran was like that, right? So there are always, at least for me, right? I shouldn't say always because whatever our mind conjures up, we think that is the only frame we have to apply to the outside world. We think everybody thinks like that, but I become more and more aware that my thinking is just one type of thinking. So for me, paracracy was a super important concept. I want to get it out, and it was also important for me that it came from, like I think you mentioned Western thought. I have a strong, nothing that you said. Everybody says this, right? I have a strong aversion to anybody saying this is Eastern versus that's Western, or this is Middle Eastern. Like the thought is a thought. I mean, it's like Rudyard Kipling. I think it is Kipling who wrote this short poem, right, called "Burden of the White Man." Right. To me, there's nothing against it. People can clamor and talk about like some Chinese mom writing about tiger mom. These are all people doing their own thing, but they become very insidious and nefarious after a period of time. What happens by that poem of Burden of the White Man is that suddenly now all white people, for whatever reason, that gradation is so not strict. Like is Turkish white, is Georgian white, but you don't know where it stops. Like if you start going, it's not very clear. But anyway, Burden of the White Man, and somehow people can put into that bucket and say it's my burden to civilize the world. So you're no longer thinking, I'm being bad to people. You just think, oh, it's my thing. Now I got to dress up these tribals. It's like then you go smack them and beat them up. So So, and then tiger moms, what does that do? For example, when somebody writes something like that, is that everybody who's not Chinese will have to think, I am not being a good parent. Maybe I am not pushing my kids hard enough like a tiger mom shall be. So these things have a very, like, even when you mention it, nothing against it, right? When we say Indians have a rich history and we have contributed a lot, I always question. Again, there is no right answer. Why is there such a big desire to establish that we had done something in the past? Why can't it be now that, again, I'm not saying you set anything up. I say that as well. Then I try to get into like, what is it? There is something about a sense of belonging, a group that has done something, then everybody can bandy about. Same thing as Rudyard Kipling saying it's white man's burden. Anybody that has nothing to do in life and he's white and says, and says, I will at least civilize people around me. Hey, you get organized here. May not amount anything else in life, suddenly feels entitled just because he or she belongs to that group. And maybe that is what it is, right? So anyway, why that long ado is that I wanted, if at all, there is something like paradox. And I do believe at some point it's a foregone conclusion that people will realize and say, why does somebody who has made whatever, like Anil Ambani, Mukesh Ambani, I'm sure they'll come after me when they hear this. Maybe not, nobody will hear this. But why 10, whatever, 1,000 crores is locked up in their family's kind of hierarchy, so to say, right? If that money is unlocked, that can help the roads and all the stuff. More importantly, Anil Ambani and Mukesh Ambani's kids will not get the advantage of actually working hard, because they will think that anything they do should yield in returns that are at the level of uh, whatever, crores of rupees rather than small initiatives, right? So people who have a lot of money will swing their best effort, like Bill Gates' son, for example. If he or she or daughter have to do something, they'll say, am I going to make $1 billion or not? Because if it's making $1 million, which in the beginning small things do, they will not even venture out because they think that it's not adding value. And somebody who's selling tea, for example, in India, will say, the die is cast so against me that I can't even climb up. How far can I make it? So the best way in 300 years from now, it'll be people saying that, what is the motivation of life? What do we really care about in life? We care about lots of answers, but my take on it was, when I look at somebody, when I see happy for them, not me, happy for them, is when I see they are operating or reaching their full potential. It's not that they're getting well fed, none of that stuff. We all care about when we see a cousin that's has great potential and hasn't done what he or she could do, we feel bad for them. So when we all collectively agree that reaching full potential is what we desire for our kids, for our cousins, for everybody, why don't we as a society drive towards that activity which enables everybody? It's not a zero sum game. Everybody can reach their full potential. Like, everybody can be healthy, everybody can be intelligent. There is no cap on it. So we should drive for that. So to me, paracracy was a step in that direction. And more importantly, I didn't want it to come from yet another Greek or Western civilization coined term. It happened to be collectively in humanity, and it happened to be in India, for example. I mean, not parochial about it, but that's where it was. That it's this notion that it can be broad based, that even governance changes can happen across the board. And anyway, so long story, but I think we are probably going to have about 12 minutes. I think there are lots of comments, Venkatesh. We have about 12 minutes. Don't want to overextend it.
Yeah, let's do question and answer then. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. I think, should we start from the start? I don't know how many there are, but okay.
Yeah, please. Yeah.
I'll try. Okay. Aditya Bharat has said, question to both Uday and Venkatesh. Do you think many Indian mysteries are still to be explored, and how India will lead the world with its heritage, culture, and mysticism? Go ahead, Venkatesh. I'll let you start, then I'll take my view.
So no, as I had mentioned earlier, I think we happen to have a very rich heritage, both history and mythology, and I think of philosophy. So there are a lot of mysteries here. I mean, I've personally come across so many of them. There was this ancient fort that I had visited once. I think it was um, um, sorry, I'm forgetting. There was a rumor of some sort of buried treasure there. I don't know if any of you have trekked to Rupkund in the Himalayas, and there were skeletons discovered there at the bottom. And these were apparently, we don't know who they are from. And apparently, the story goes that they're probably from pilgrims who were visiting during one of the, ancient, maybe 1,500 or 2,000 years ago. There's another story that there was a war there. I mean, these are just simple examples, but everything from our cities to our, forts to our kings to our festivals, there's so much history and unexplored, unexplained aspects to them that I think we have. I think there's probably an endless supply of stories, literature, popular folk art, etc., that can be made out of them. And it's not just places; it's also people. We are now looking closely at various people who were involved in the freedom struggle and the various trials, tribulations, and intrigue that they were involved in. There's also a lot of interesting stuff around science. So actually, as part of the research for my second book, Agniban, I was reading up on not ancient, but I would say mathematicians in the 0 to 500 CE period. And it's amazing how many advances we had made in mathematics. The whole concept of magic squares, which is part of mathematics today, was Varaha Mihira's contribution. And he wrote he compiled a series of books on mathematics and astronomy. So to cut a long story short, I think we have a lot of areas which lend themselves to mystery and interpretation. This bit about leading the world, I don't know. As I think Uday also mentioned, I don't think we should look at things from the prism of whether we are leading the world or not. I think we do what we are doing. We relook at our past, understand it better, delve deeper, and that itself, is enough fodder for the next few hundred years, I think. Uday, any thoughts from your side?
Sure. I mean, I think India as a whole, my aspiration, right? I think I wish and I hope that there is more exposure to folks within India to the rest of the world, right? I don't know how to say it. Like I'll try to say it the best I can, right? Somehow when I go to India, I'm beginning to come out of it, and I can appreciate it. In India, somehow there is complete absolution of any responsibility to anything. We are not a communistic society, but we've given it up to when we go to India, when a road is broken, we just feel like that is how it is. And why that has happened, when I dig deeper, and I'll come to that point, right? It may seem like very innocuous, but I'll come there. Somehow nobody says that's not my road, but actually there is a person, there is a local MLA or something like that that's signing a contract that's actually ensuring that once the road was laid by some contractor, and they are going into regular renewals of it, and they renew the same contract, but somehow the person that is signing the contract has no accountability to it. Maybe it is just a UPSC person, IAS officer, I don't know who signs it. I don't even know all this stuff, right? So there is complete lack of accountability, and that is a cultural shift we need to go through and come back to, right? And I'll come to where I'm going with it, right? So we also attributed then a lot of our whatever is happening to gods. It's fine. People can look at it both ways, and people say when we're poor, you go that way. But I'm not sure. I don't think we have to necessarily say that, oh, we'd have nothing under control, that our actions don't matter. I do not believe that way. I don't think there's anything. When a wind blows, if you just say whatever will happen, you will get blown out. I don't think God is going to come there when it doesn't impact on a moment by moment basis, and life is all about moment by moment. I don't think there is any macro God taking care of it. I'm not even sure if there's a purpose to life or not. We are just chemical beings that kind of came out. Maybe not. But anyway, we are here. But in India, there's a culture of complete abstraction of individual contribution. That's where I was going with it, right? So I think as I think Venkatesh pointed out, I forgot her name, but Mehta, right? Uma Mehta, Usha Mehta, right? So I would love to see that, and there is a lot more. We are all living. Like Venkatesh's story now could have lots of mysteries and intrigue in it. I'm not saying, I'm sure Venkatesh has multiple cell phones, he's talking to different people, doing all interesting activities. I might do the same, but anyway, so there I don't think there is ever a shortage of mystery or intrigue, right? It's about bringing that out as an individual. India has, for the last 1800 years, I'm still trying to understand, right? The notion of an individual contribution got lost, maybe because our libraries was burnt. I don't know what the real genesis is, right? And with Mughals coming in, so on and so forth, or maybe we were naturally that way. Like, I don't know what it is, right? But we have completely given up individual contributions. We only think, oh, Darwin said this said that. We never quote XYZ said that. I see that now a little bit, Ratan Tata being quoted, or Abdul Kalam Azad and stuff like that. But that too, like, they're like governance folks, right? But I want that to come from like strong content focused expertise, right? But so there is some, and also we don't have strong IP rights, for example. The reason why this is all kind of integral to why we do not give attribution to individual contributions in India. That is a fundamental shift we need to go through, right? We need to be able to say this came, like Aryabhatta one jumps out, but there's lots of people. There are people who taught him, right? And there's a lot more that is going on that doesn't come through. So anyway, like, just in terms of mystery, if you look at Pokhran Blast 1, the test, plus I think there's an ask of 2, executing that, I think Ashutosh is asking, and I'll just comment on it, right? You can see a bit of it from my book, Ashutosh, but not necessarily how to read the book, right? You can also read up Google and stuff like that. You will find that, as I was talking earlier, right, that you will find that there was so much planning and secrecy around it that it's mind-boggling that in India we could achieve it, right? And that too with so much oversight from other nations trying to track down and detect these things, right? So if that could be done, I am sure other things can be done. But, and partly whoever is even curious of it should be thinking about it. There is nothing stopping us from our individual towns, villages, and cities to try to hold groups where you uncover mysteries. There is always, like, we never regarded, like, I think as Venkatesh was saying, if there was brick that is old, we just dug up, use it for another house. That's just how it is. We lose a lot of it. Whereas something like that happens in Europe or something like that, they would have like, oh, this is a historical monument, which is good. We should try to do that. But that comes, people say, oh, if you're short for food, how can you think about a brick? But I think it's a fundamental change in thinking. It's that whole notion that we can all aspire to be intelligent. We do not have to suspend our thinking. Anyway.
Yeah. The good part is that some part of our history we are now beginning to value a lot more. I remember about 15 years ago or thereabouts, I had gone to Orcha and I happened to be there on some work, and there are these very beautiful temples there. And they were just literally, they were creepers all over and it was untended. I'm told that it's changed now. So some positive changes happening. Yeah. Sorry, there's another question now. Do you think India has to depend on any other civilization to be unique in the world? Uday, why don't you go?
I think I speak too much. Hey, Navajyoti, I saw your other comment as well. I'm glad I could make you laugh a little bit. Oh, yes. As I said, my wife will probably not laugh at it, but when I say she was the motivation for me to start writing, I am not kidding. That, like, you can see me here. I love talking. So I'm sure in a year or two, I'm going to go off on a trail teaching. I might not planning to teach in India, but like I was planning to teach in Sri Lanka and stuff like that. So anyway, coming back, the fact that you're asking the question, right? So I always look at the questions that people ask, and that actually indicates a lot more about their train of thought and the thinking. I like that question, the way you're thinking about it, because that indicates a macro view of the world, right? So to me, the answer is that we all need everybody. So somehow we have, I don't know why it is, maybe there's a fight for resources, but I keep imagining this world, right? That not world, a universe where we will not be short of resources. Right now we are, I know we are still in that infancy, right? But once we kind of go off to different planets, which we will, right? Either we'll die out or we'll go off, we will have access to unlimited resources. What all that will matter to us, I truly think at that point, is, are you being engaged?
Hello. Hello. Yeah, I think there's been a gap in the video. So just to go back to Navjyoti's question, my view on this is that I think we live in an interconnected world, and even more so now because we are facing a big challenge in the form of climate change. To address it, no one nation can do the job. We are all as strong as our weakest link. So I think all civilizations across the world will be forced to be interconnected now. But there is another part of your question, which is, do we need to depend on any civilization to be unique? And there, I think, as with individuals, each individual is unique, and we don't have to depend on somebody else for that uniqueness. I think that uniqueness is inherent in us, and we have actually not just history, but culture, literature, science, and so many things. So for that, we don't have to depend. But the first part is, yes, I think now forcibly, I think all civilizations are going to have to be interdependent because of the challenges we face. Sorry, Uday, you were half talking when I think you got dropped off.
Sorry. Thanks, Venkatesh. I think you fielded it well. I was just going to say that we will have unlimited resources, but maybe it won't happen in our lifetime, or maybe it might, right? In another 20, 30 years, like you saw, NASA extracted something from an asteroid. Like I said, SpaceX is building out stuff to go to Mars. We're going to moon. Imagine a world where if you're able to take just a rocket and get out, it may seem like really weird, like a plane, right? You will have a lot of resources. So you will want intelligent thought. Like when I look around, that's why at least I keep talking about it. All these different civilizations will actually feed a lot more interesting insights to you. Like if it was all, I'll just make stuff up, right? Let's call ourselves brown. If we're all brown, actually India is a lot more of a melting pot than people appreciate. Okay, but if you go to Georgia, I'm making stuff up, right? Predominantly white. That's how they call them Caucasians, because that's where I think Caucasus and stuff like that, right? So you will find that suddenly a different colored skin seems interesting. What do they have? If it's not like anyone is good or bad, right? We just anyway, different topic. So the different civilizations and their slightly different modes of thinking are quite integral and interesting to make our lives move forward. Right? We should always think about it as progress. And if you actually take a step back, right? And I think this is where one of my very highly recommended books from my side, at least, not that it's great or not, it's called Troublesome Inheritance, right? If we all take a step back and say, how did we come here? Like we landed on Indus Valley civilization. Nothing against it, Venkatesh and I were talking about it. But Indus Valley civilization is 5,000, maybe 7,000 years old. What before that? We might just say, we don't know. We came from gods. Fine. That's an answer I cannot really answer. But if you imagine that we kind of conclude that, DNA and all the stuff is very similar, we can assume that we derived from the same thing. So let's say we started off in Africa. The way to think about it is that it was not millions of people that we're seeing right now. Imagine a world where 2 people went off to something called Germany, or 4 people. 2 people went off to London, right? 2 people came to Himalayas and stuff like that, and 2 people went to Sri Lanka, and that grew over a period of time. So when you attribute a certain characteristic trait to Indians as such, it's all derived from that foundational tree. It's called the founder gene, right? So that's why you see certain characteristic traits, why certain people are that way. So it's not that they're fundamentally that phenomenally different. It's that notion that small groups of 2, 3, 4 people, and they kind of had the family grow and so on and so that became 10,000, 100,000 people and 1,000,000 people, but you find commonalities, right? So we are all in that way connected. So how far back do you go? Do you stop it at India because we created a boundary, or do you stop it at like Asia? Do you want to go to Africa, or do you all say we are all the same? So a lot of it is just giving it thought and trying to understand the world, right? Then the question might become like, to me, all civilizations are needed because everybody did something different. Like the paper currency came from China, for example. Otherwise, you'd be using leather or metal, for example, right? Gunpowder came from there. And from us, for example, Buddhism came, or non-violence and vegetarianism. So I'm sure there are lots of other things. I know it says 59 minutes, Venkatesh. I don't know if we have to extend it or not, but we'll see. I don't know what your preference is. Did we answer the questions?
Yeah, we can extend it. So do we have any more questions? Yeah.
Cool. So before we sign off, I want at least, okay, it says extend. We will extend 5 more minutes. So over to you. Thanks, Ashutosh, for saying cool.
Thank
Over
you.
to you, Venkatesh. Then before you go, hold on. I don't want you to go away. So tell us about, in 30 seconds, so that we're not boring anyone, your background, corporate background, as well as everything else that I'm sure educationally, academically, and whatnot you would have accomplished.
So quick background. So I, like a lot of other Indians of that time, so I did my engineering from IIT Delhi and then went on to do my MBA. And I worked in the equity markets for about 8 years, first Credit Suisse, then JP Morgan and Deutsche Bank. I still continue to be an avid investor and follow the stock markets very closely. But somewhere I realized that I wanted to have a more active role in the businesses that I was advising. So I joined a couple of private equity firms, AMP and Macquarie, invested in a lot of infrastructure projects, roads, ports, telecom towers, and so on. Went to Vietnam and Singapore for a few years. Some of the interesting experiences in Vietnam, especially in the tunnels, the war tunnels, for instance, find some sort of resonance within the book that I wrote. And that's actually, the stint in Vietnam was when I was traveling a lot and ended up writing the book. I've been back in India now 5 years, and I run my own consulting firm, and I divide my time between writing and the consulting work that I do. Yeah, maybe a quick background from your side before we.
Sure. We should definitely catch up on your private equity and your stock investing. One question before I over to my area. So are you mostly like Indian stock investor, or do you also look globally? Or do you have access globally? Okay.
Globally, both.
You probably have access to dollars and stuff. I don't know if that works for like Indians that are not.
No, the RBI has these liberalized remittance rules.
Okay.
So you can invest in.
You can take Indian rupees and invest in US.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So for me, same thing, right? I don't think I was a fit for engineering, although later on I realized that I might be. But I did my mechanical engineering from Usmania. Then after that, I've been in the US. I did a couple of masters and MBA, and almost like I know it becomes like a natural thing to quote education and all that, but I feel like that's done. It's over, right? I mean, I've done it. It's not a big deal. Then so many things happen in our life that enrich us and make us what we are. Stating that this job or this education is what defines me, I feel, even to you, Venkatesh, or anybody I see, as limiting. That's one of the reasons why, at least Venkatesh and I, when we spoke before we come on the call, I didn't want to necessarily just get into that right away. Although that seems like a standard way people, what's your name? What did you do? What are you doing? But I feel like a person is a lot more. And it's a lot harder task to understand a person for what they are than trying to ask them for what their name is. So I try to, like, whenever I strike conversations with people, I try to, by design, stay away from what they've done, what is it they do, and what their name is. I try to talk more at the conceptual level. And I found it hard earlier, but now it's become easier and easier. But anyway, that's just my 2 cents, right? So
no, very interesting, actually. Very interesting. You relate directly to the person rather than their credentials, quote unquote.
Yes, exactly, right. So that you try to get to know the person. It's challenging a little bit. They find it hard, and I found people like that. Why are you talking all this? Why are you so inquisitive? I'm like, if you don't get it, I'm not going to engage, right? If you warm up to the concept, then let's see, because then the discussion starts out on an interesting footing rather than somehow the opening of the book or the movie has to be intro. No, it doesn't have to be. It can jump right in, somebody killing somebody or somebody blowing up something. It doesn't matter. I'm sure they do it that way, but a conversation doesn't have to always say, let me take 15 minutes with the slow pace, and then I will jump into something more interesting after that. So anyway, and what defines me, like, to me, writing is important. And I try to do, like, my personal take, and I tell my kids as well, is that the best thing we can do is to add value to society. And anybody that says, whether they can make money versus not, and so on. So I always feel like if you can deliver value, whatever it is that you determine, you will be fed. And how do I know it? I imagine a village that's like 10 people strong and there's nothing else. All people do is farm. You have to go there and farm. There is land there. You farm some more. You got some more rice. You can feed yourself. You want to sing and get fed? You can do that. As long as the 10 people that are in the village say, you know what, your singing makes me feel good in the evening. And hence I'm giving you 1 kilo of rice every day. Then a singer is born, right? But if everybody in that community didn't feel that singing is adding any value, tough luck. You're not going to get fed. Right? So anyway, so this was awesome, Venkatesh. I really enjoyed it.
Same here, and no thanks to the organizers and thanks to the audience. I see that Vandana ji, the founder of We Care, which is an NGO which has done stellar work in the medical field, is also on the audience in the audience list. So thank you. It's been a very engaging conversation, Uday, and thank you to the audience and the organizers as well.
Absolutely. Thanks, Venkatesh. I won't repeat the same, but much appreciated. Okay. Thanks for the engagement.
Wonderful.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.